I love Star Wars. I love a fun, rollicking space adventure. Oh, that's right. This is Andor. So this episode features harrowing oppression in a prison with the looming threat of mass murder. Mon Mothma's husband just being a real old prick. Admittedly, that one, it's less extreme, but it's still awful nonetheless. Oh, and that's right. This episode begins with the most awful, extreme, intense, bloodless torture sequence. They have a device they have created where you put it on and the person can hear the dying screams of an entire race of creatures that died in some kind of genocidal some kind of empire situation that involved them all screaming to their deaths. Oh, and if that wasn't horrifying enough, they've modified it so you can only hear the children. Yay, fun, rollicking space adventures. Oh, I love Star Wars. I bloody love this so much. I mean, it's all very, very extreme and awful, and I feel bad for every single person in the show. Oh, but boy, am I having so much fun watching this show. It was such a clever decision to utilize the kind of horrors of the unknown and the imagination of the audience when playing, or should I say, not playing the actual screams and sounds of that dying race of creatures. Like, at first, when they mention what's going on, I'm like, what the hell? I cannot wait to hear what kind of crazy, insane sounds we hear. But then when they, put the thing on her head and everything just goes... and all the sound is sucked out and it's just focusing on her face, her acting, and we're realizing, oh, we're not going to hear it, and it's all implied. It's all just from the horrors that we can possibly imagine. And it was so clever, because at that point, my imagination was going wild with what kind of crazy sounds I would hear, but then seeing her reaction and, her face, and having no other kind of, music or soundtrack going on was just inspired. It really, really upset me. It made me so deeply upset. Miro's been a character I've really, really loved. I'm kind of like, oh, I'm on her side all this time. And it's kind of weird to be on the Empire's side because it's usually so kind of black and white. And you love a Kylo Ren or whatever, but usually you're like, well, I don't really want the Death Star to kill everybody or whatever. And so for the whole series, I've really enjoyed that nuance of being like, oh, Mira, she's on the wrong side. But I'm really enjoying her kind of, rise to power and kind of not taking any of this Empire bullshit and kind of figuring it all out. And that's been really fun. And then this episode makes you go, oh, but remember, she's on the Empire and she sucks. She's just the worst. She has so many little moments of, getting pleasure out of it. Like when she's talking to Smix, something with an X or something, I think. Sounded very Star Wars-y, whatever that girl who's getting tortured's name is. And she's like, oh, you're bloody loving this. And I'm like, I think Miro is loving this. And then there's a moment later on when she's talking to the guy in the big council room. I don't know any of their names. They're all from other things. I just keep seeing him as Qyburn from Game of Thrones. But he's all like, oh, yeah, we're using the mother as bait. I like that. And she's like, yes, we are. And she's very calm and collected most of the time. But there was this tiny little glimmer of a smile. And it was just so upsetting. It's there for half a second, but it's oh my god, she is loving this. She's crazy, and I love it. I'm loving to now kind of hate her. So last week I claimed that the prison stuff was kind of a little bit generic. It didn't really work for me. It was a little bit goofy. But I have to say, having watched this episode, I have never been so wrong in my entire life. You know what, to be fair, I probably have. I was just quoting Thorin from Hobbit 1. I have made some terrible mistakes and decisions in my life, and I have been more wrong in my life. Oh, so many times. And I'm not saying the last episode was good and I was wrong. I haven't actually rewatched it. But a little peek behind the curtain. Last week, as I was editing, I started to feel a little bit bad in my tummy. And I'm like, oh, I don't feel great. This edit's, I wanted to get it done and go to bed. And then I woke up in the middle of the night, all sweaty and sick, and I was just sick AF. I just was having a bad time. I didn't have a good time at all. So maybe I was watching the episode and that was creeping in and I was just not in my right space, because this week, the prison stuff, perfect, amazing, so horribly ominous and intense. I feel like everything I didn't like about it, the robots talking, the way it was so sterile and structured, the way they're just doing this manual labor thing, I just love it all. When I first saw it, I kind of felt I wanted to reveal that they're building the Death Star, or they're helping doing this or that, some big grand thing. But no, that's not why Andor is such a good show. It's just them doing menial nothing tasks, and they even say droids are more expensive, so they've just got us doing it, and they can just replace us more easily because they can pick us up for doing literally nothing. I was standing by the beach sweating, and I was sweating because I was, a criminal afraid of things, but it was also very hot, but they didn't believe me, and I was just a tourist. But no, now I'm locked up here forever. It's so extreme and intense, but it really does work to kind of show just how awful the Empire is just on this kind of huge scale, like how many of these giant prisons do they have. One of the highlights for me for the whole episode was that moment where they like found out something happened on level 2, but like because they're in these big tubes and everyone's so separate because the prison is so big, they can't get information like to each other quick enough, so it's all rumors, it's all hearsay. And that was just a really interesting, chaotic way to kind of show how big the prison is, how kind of like isolated and alone they are in their little area. It was also a really great moment to show where young sexy Snoke was kind of mentally at the start of this scene, where he's like, I'm not going to tell you anything, like we've just got to go by the rules, blah. And then by the end of the episode, the kind of arc of him going all rebel. I do have to say though, it is a little confusing because when we first get a glimpse of young sexy Snoke, it's kind of like, oh, he's one of the prisoners, so he was doing bad, but clearly he's like wanting to like help out the guards, so like we're seeing that little, like that dark side of him. Whereas this episode, he slowly turns to be on Andor's side, which is kind of baffling. I think what is going to happen though is he'll obviously side with Andor, they'll escape the prison, but then there'll be this really tragic kind of turn, like this flip back to the dark side, and it's going to be this really tragic moment where like, oh, he thought he was going to do so well, but because this is a prequel, we know the outcome where he turns into a giant man with golden robes and a giant scar. My fan theory, Andor makes the scar. I think that would be emotionally satisfying. At one point I thought it might be the old man, but since he died, it's got to be Andor, right? It is very bold of Andor the show to kind of, you know, delve into The Last Jedi, the most controversial film apparently ever, at least for Star Wars. It's like a area you don't want to like go into because it splits everyone so hard. So it's going to be interesting when we get this kind of origin story for Snoke. I am most excited though for that moment where he puts on the gold robe and goes, guys, I think I found my look. This isn't a criticism on the actor or a character. I think it's more emphasizing how great everything else in this show really truly is. But Andor is kind of like the least interesting character in the show a lot of the time. Like, I'm really enjoying the character, like way more than I did in the movie, where he kills that guy at the start, and then you're like, oh god, this guy's really intense, but then he doesn't kill Galen Erso for no reason. I'm not going to get into it. But in this, he is a really interesting, well fleshed out character. He is really great. He is just less exciting than your Mon Mothmas, your young sexy Snokes, your third example of a character. But the scene that I really loved from him this episode was where he's like asking young sexy Snoke, he's like, tell me how many guards? And he's just screaming. He's like, nobody's listening. Which, fun little fact, is the title of the episode. It's not really a fact, is it? It's just, I mean, I guess it's a fact. It is factual. I just love this line because he's so true and he's so right, but it's also so awful and scary to think how big something is, you know, where they're all just little ants and they don't care. I don't care what the ants are doing. I'm not going to listen. Like, why would they listen? Why would they put that effort in when they don't need to? And it shows kind of where the Empire thinks they are and how the rebellion was able to start because all these people can do these little things because no one's listening. And then ironically, Miro, she's listening. And I found all of that really interesting. The scene in which Mon Mothma gets roasted by all the other people in the Senate and she's on her big floating Senate thingy and she's all like, I'm saying things that are making sense and oh, everything's bad. And everyone's like, boo, shut this woman up, she sucks. And that felt really realistic. That reminded me of watching politics in my country, like local politics, where they're just yelling at each other from across the room and they're all just acting like bickering children. And this was the same. I also really like the touch of like people being like, I disagree, and they hit the thing and their like little light band of light and whatever, it disappears and, you know, turns off. I don't know if that's been something that's happened and I just never noticed it before, but I really like that little touch. I don't know, it was a really good way for everyone to kind of understand, like, oh, the room's turning on me, I can read the room because it's dimmer now, less light. Oh, bad for me. So Mon Mothma's husband, whose name I will not remember because he sucks, he continues just to be a real old, big old, a bad guy. The worst part about him is he feels so real, like the way he's talking to Mon Mothma's cousin, who turns out it's the wife, the character from the other episodes. Oh, that was a big reveal that I did not see coming. Like, she's sitting there, and it took me like a moment to realize what had happened because I knew her cousin was coming, and I was like, oh, it's all connected, and it's such a really fun way to kind of connect everything, and it feels really kind of like natural. But the way that the husband is talking to her, he's just such a dick, but I don't feel like he even realizes how much of a dick he's being. Like, I feel like he's just saying what he thinks. He's not even trying to be rude about it, but he's being so rude. He's just such a bad guy. I don't know, I thought that was really realistic and very like subtle way to do it. I also think it was a really clever thing to kind of bring this character into like Mon Mothma's family, because it adds this really interesting extra dimension and layer to her, where it's like, oh, so she's also undercover, and so everybody thinks she's just this rich traveling trust fund girl, and she's just off partying and seeing the world and blah, 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 and just spending money and being whatever. Whereas in fact, no, she's in the rebellion. This show is doing such a good job at just like adding little layers here and there, and it's fleshing them out so quickly. Like we only get like 2 or 3 minutes to do all of this stuff. We're seeing such a bigger picture of how this has all started, how it started before the show started, and where it's leading to. And it's just doing it so cleverly and so quickly. It doesn't feel forced. It feels really natural. All the scenes are working really, really well. It is continually surprising me how excellent this show is at like crafting this world of the rebellion, and I just love it so much. So Ramsey Boltons' younger brother, who looked like he's the kind of guy who was a prefect at high school, but not the cool prefect that would see you doing something wrong and is like, oh, next time, oh, you'll be in trouble, but you just, go on. But he's like, no, detention for you straight away, and you're like, oh, I hate the prefect. Are prefects even a thing? I know they're a thing from like Harry Potter at Hogwarts. I don't think we had prefects in my high school. But maybe I wasn't there enough to, I just don't know. But yeah, his mother, just insufferable, her turning on a dime when he's like, I got a promotion. She's like, oh, did I say I hated you and wanted you to die? Actually, I love you, son. I love you. Very realistic and awful in that way, but just insufferable. I also don't think I realized how much he hated Andor till this episode. Like, he's like the vitriol, like the fury in his eyes. Really great performance. But it's just crazy to think, oh man, this guy hates Andor. Like, oh, he can't, he's like, Andor's my Batman and I'm his Joker, and oh, we're gonna have a big punchy punch. And Andor's like, who are you? Oh, you're Ramsey Bolton's brother, the guy who was a prefect at high school. Yeah, I heard you sucked. I was kind of surprised to see Miro shut him down so hard. At first, I thought they were going to team up and be like, we're bad guys together. Well, like Batman and Robin, but pick 2 villains. I couldn't think of a villain and a sidekick villain. Joker and Harley Quinn. Oh my god, it was right there the whole time. But since she has shut him down, I'm hoping he goes full Ethan Hunt and just goes rogue. So we end this episode with the Doctor killing the old man, and he's just like, I can't do anything. I can't do anything for anyone. You're all gonna die because someone who got let out of the prison, they just actually put him in a different section, but they found that out. So apparently no one's leaving the prison, and it's kind of like the movie The Island, except it's almost worse because they're just kind of reshuffling them to different areas. I guess. I don't know, because he was like, oh, no one's getting out of here now. So did he imply that people were getting out, and it was just like one guy got out, but they decided to reshuffle him? I was a little confused, but also the whole thing is essentially like, oh, now they're all going to die. They're going to just like genocide the prison. They're just going to wipe everyone out section by section and restart. But I would be curious what people kind of took from that, because at first I'm like, oh my god, so they're just reshuffling people into different sections where they'll never meet. But then I was like, no, but if you did that, that person will immediately be like, oh, you don't escape. You just get put in a different section, which is what happened. And that guy said it. Or did that guy escape and then just get arrested again and then they put him back? But that's kind of fair. Like if you do a crime and you get sent to prison, but then you've done your time, but you do a new crime, you go back to prison. That's like how it works. So I don't know. I was a little confused how that worked. Do they kind of erase your memory so you don't know you've already been? If they are just reshuffling everyone? I don't know. Overall, though, it was a really ominous way to end the episode, and it was a really great moment. It was a really great moment when young, sexy Snoke was like, there's 12 on every level, and you're like, oh, character development, I love it! But also, very sad, because you're like, oh, but he's just going to turn back to the dark side. Because I've seen The Last Jedi, it's inevitable. The curse of prequels, just, it's tragic. It's powerful, and it's tragic. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment below. I'd love to know what everyone thought of episode 9 of Andor.